All right, now we're going to go through chapter 14 on visual aids. I'll show you some different types of options for visual aids and what to do for each of those. So let's get started. The different types of visual aids that you have options for with public speaking include objects, pictures, diagrams, charts, and graphs, film, video, or audio, and handouts. Let's start with objects. So objects would be the things that you bring into class, right? They must be large enough for everyone to see. They have to have impact and serve some sort of a purpose. That you can only have them out while you're speaking with them and discussing it, and make sure that it doesn't become a nervous adapter, because anything that's in your hands, chances are, will become a nervous adapter. So again, this was an example that I brought up in the last video regarding having content on the slide and being committed to reading all of the words that are brought up on that slide. I feel like that was a little bit too much on content, and I probably could have told it to you in a more effective way. Let's try. So objects are things that you actually bring to class. They have to be large enough for everyone to see. If they're not big enough for the person in the back to see, you need to use like an Elmo device. You can only have them out when you are using them for that particular part of your speech. When you're done, you need to figure out a place that you can put it away so that it won't be distracting. Because chances are whatever's in your hand is going to be something that you play with and adapt throughout the speech. So when you need it, you can get it from some place that it wouldn't be distracting, and when you're done, you can put it away so that it's not distracting as well. Okay, let's go on to the next and look at images. This is an example of an image that would be appropriate in size and in coloration. So you have to be very careful that your pictures aren't grainy, that they look professional, and that they prove some sort of a point, okay? So the point here would obviously be money. Now where this is a poor visual aid comes in to the fact that we know what money looks like. So I may not need to show a picture of money to have my audience understand money. And in fact, if I wanted them to think, for example, like about the high cost of college, it might be better for me to do some sort of an object lesson instead. If I had, say, $500 in my pocket, if I brought that $500 out, that would create more of an impact for your audience, because they would be able to feel what $500 looks like and how much it means to an average college student. So you do want to think about objects in regard to, would an image be better to display it, or would the actual object be what shows more of that impact? So let's go to the next for images as well. Make sure that you are only using pictures on PowerPoints if you are showing images. You don't want to tape anything to the boards or anything like that. It's going to be too small. Make sure that the pictures create clarity with focus and they're not being distracting in and of themselves. We talked about that in the last video. Make sure that the picture is the appropriate size. It's always going to look best if it's all the way out on the screen. And make sure that you have the option of a black slide in between your images so that you can take things away. And again, if you don't have a clicker like this or a remote, then you will need to put black slides in between it so that you can take the picture off when you're done with your audience focusing on that point. So here's an example of a picture that would be poor. There's a couple of things that are wrong with it. One, the size. The size is not appropriate. It's much better all the way out on the screen. But two, the clarity of the picture is a problem. What are we supposed to be getting from this that relates to friends? Are cats really friends? You know, is that helping my message, or is it creating a distraction point? If you're someone like me as a critical thinker, I'm thinking, did they Photoshop that paw, or was that glued on? You know, there could be all sorts of problems with images like this. We could go to an image here. This is much bigger and cleaner. But again, clarity. What does this really add if I was going to be talking about friends? There's nothing worth looking at here. It would be better not to have anything at all and having me describe my friends, or having a picture of my friends for the audience to see, me and my friends or something like that. So don't just put a visual aid to have a visual aid there. It actually ends up being more distracting rather than something that helps. Here's an example of something that's the appropriate size, but that might have a potential clarity issue. So there's so many things going on that your audience would expect you to somehow focus on and explain. So, for example, you could put this in like a Prezi presentation where it moves and it focuses in on different parts. Let's say that this was some symbolism from a Native American culture representing, I don't know, hope and care. And maybe the different parts of it say different parts of that message. That would be great to have a Prezi where you show the overall image and then it zooms right down into this part, which you could focus on and explain to the audience, zooms back, zooms out on another part for you to focus and understand the symbolism behind it. So, otherwise, don't use this complex of an image. Here's an example of an image that would take time for your audience to process. Even with me speaking right now, that's not, you're trying to figure out what this says. So if you put something on your slides that look like this, that look like it, the audience needs a second to process it, give them a second. Turn your back, read it along with them. It creates an experience for your audience to process with. It's also really engaging for them to look at. So you want to let them process it and then take it away before it becomes a distraction. So, and again, the body posturing like we talked about in the last video. You've got to make sure that as they're participating in this, you are also one of them participating so that they aren't going between the two and trying to decide where their focus should be. There is one thing wrong with this image though. Look how much better it would look if it was out to the full size. So again, making sure that you're thinking about your audience, what's going to help them process the easiest is always the goal with visual aids. Okay, the next that we can talk about is chart graphs and diagrams. So with these, you want to aim for clarity of ideas. Try to be as specific as you can, but also don't include too much information. Give information that's applicable to your case, but not information that would detract. The appropriate size needs consideration as well, just like with any image. So make sure that you're not cluttering the images and that you are including material that will help regain the focus of what you're talking about. So here's an example of a chart. This chart is the appropriate size. It's got at least 32 points, but it has too much information. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different categories. That's too many for your audience to go through. And remember, you're obligated with these words to read every single line, which is going to seem too cumbersome. If you were comparing, for example, we wanted to look at birth and immigration between Asia and Africa, you know, something like that, then you would take out the rest of the numbers and just use those two numbers as a comparison. When you do that, you might want to decide to shoot it into some sort of a bar graph or chart. Here's an example, but it's also a poor example because there's too many things going on and the color combinations don't necessarily match. Also, we have some issues with the wording over here being white and not easy to pick out. So if I was going to talk about the difference between blacks and whites with median household income, it would be better for this to be an entire slide by itself. Or if I was going to do infant mortality, that by itself and onward. And also being very careful that whatever is brought out makes perfect sense. It'd be better even with blacks and whites to have black and white as your color instead of confusing your audience with others. Pie charts are another example of something that you could do. If you do a pie chart, then make sure again that the information is very clear and the comparison between the two. All right, notice that one pie chart would have looked a lot better than the two. Again, showing that if you have too much information going on at once, it can be hard for your audience to process. But if you process 1 year at a time, helping them to understand this was the percentage of single people in the 1900s, and that was the percent of the married people, and then show them the contrast back to 2005 and how that switched, it's going to make more of an impact for them. These are fake. I just typed something into a pie chart, so none of it is real. All right, here's another example of a chart or a graph. So in that same lens, you might be doing something that's visually representing your information. So like perhaps it's spatially organized data. And if that's the case, make sure again that you highlight that particular part of the image to add clarity. So either through a Prezi or something else where the image can shift and really highlight the different part so that you can speak the information that you would need to present. Okay, the last thing that we would talk about is your video and audio clips. These are perhaps the most dangerous additions to your presentation because it takes so many outside forces to make it work correctly. You've got to make sure that the volume is appropriate, that it's hooked up beforehand, that there's not some weird like timing thing on the computer where it turns off in the middle of your presentation. So be very aware that this can be problematic, but don't be afraid to use them at the same time. As you saw in the other video, that it is nice to have an audio or a video clip that's embedded, especially if it's specifically embedded into your presentation. If you go outside of the presentation for this content, you have to be aware of other external factors that could come into play, like the video could be taken down even just the night before and you weren't aware of it. Or there could be other videos that pop up on the side of the screen that are really distracting or inappropriate. So here's your rule of thumb with videos and audios. Make sure that it's linked to your PowerPoint, tested beforehand and ready to go. Make sure that you're aware of any problems that might occur with other posting changes, etc. And don't let it be more than 10% of your total amount of time speaking. It can't be a cop-out from you taking the audience's focus. And finally, make sure that the appropriate volume was pre-checked. And know that this tends to change per room. So you could be checking this with your computer at home, you could check it with the Speech Labs computer, and then come into one of the classroom's computers and see that it's a completely different story. It's either way too quiet or too loud. And if you have to restart your video for a reason, or you have to adjust the volume at any point, it's going to be a distraction and look like you were less prepared. Okay, the last then that is something to focus on is your handouts. So handouts are an option if you would like to use these, but if you do, make sure that they are very relevant and very clear, and that you only hand them out after you're done speaking. So handouts are a great option if you want to give them more information, or like with a persuasive message, give them a place to go to sign up for your petition or to research more about whatever your call to action is. Otherwise, they can be a distraction. They're especially distracting if you hand them out at the beginning of your presentation, because they will have now this thing out in front of them that is going to be automatically competing for your attention. So you want to wait. You can show it to them in the speech and be like, I have a handout that I'm going to be giving to you later, and set it aside. Or at the very end of your speech, you can just bring it out and say, I do have a handout for you to help illustrate or whatever. The same thing goes with like handing out cookies or showing any images or something like that you actually wanted to pass around to have them hold. So make sure that it happens at the end of your presentation, not in the middle or at the beginning. So that's it for visual aids. Always do a lot of preparation and thought into them. You will have to do 2 visual aids for your persuasive speeches. They can be both images, they can be both handouts, it doesn't matter. So you could have like 2 images in a PowerPoint, that works as your 2 visual aids. But put a lot of thought into these and make sure that you're not including anything that doesn't aid what you're saying. So it shouldn't replace what you're saying. It should be something that aids the message, doesn't distract from it. And it's not just a cop-out. And be aware that anything that you put on the screen, you're going to have to focus on. If you spend too much time back with your visual aid, that's going to cost you in your relationship with your audience. And so less definitely is more. And being able to regain the space with a black slide is definitely a must. Thank you.